Welcome to the meeting. Members, please. Welcome to this meeting of the Housing Subcommittee on Monday the 6th of March. I'd just like to remind members that this meeting will be recorded and made available for public listening. I'll go through on to item 1, please. Sederunt and apologies.
Good afternoon, everyone. We have 9 members present, and I have an apology from Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Scobie will be substituting for Councillor Foster.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Item 5, I'm a council-appointed director of the Small Community Session Trust, and as such, I'll take no part in the meeting.
Good. Jim Dempster?
Thanks, Chair. Item 4, Housing Scotland Act Scheme of Assistance. There's a few references to the Integrated Joint Board. I'm chair of the Integrated Joint Board, but I understand that Scottish Government are given dispensation, compensation might be better, dispensation for members to take decisions, although they're still on the IGB. So I want it noted that I'm a member, but I will remain and take part in the deliberations.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Yes, I can confirm that that's correct, that the Scottish Government have given special dispensation.
Thanks, Lucy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Dennis.
Same issue. I'm a member of the IGB.
You got that noted, Lucy? For Dennis.
Just generally, that's the advice for the IGB members.
Okay. Ian?
I picked up on that point, also being a member of the IGB, but I thought we were referred to full council, and I thought it would have been declarable at that point, so I maybe misunderstood that. So if it is a declaration of interest, I'd like to register that.
Okay. Thank you. No more members? Okay. Just before we actually go into item 3 on the agenda, the Strategic Housing Investment Plan, just a couple of things I'd just like to inform members about. And that's in relation to where we are with this at the moment. As I'm sure you've read from the body of the report, we have a new housing association that has been brought into Dumfries and Galloway to help us take our resource planning assumption up to the maximum capacity that we can at this time in point. The reason we have gone to ask other housing associations, and it's not restricted to just Cunningham, who we have here with us today. Irvine as well have come forward to say they're happy to work with us going forward. But that invitation is open to any housing association that feels that they can offer anything to us in Dumfries and Galloway. So it's not specific to a particular housing association. So we are open for business and open for discussions with anybody that wishes to come and talk to us on that matter. The reason, as I say, that we had the initial discussions with Cunningham is the fact that we were falling behind on our resource planning assumption and actually being able to deliver that to a maximum benefit for Dumfries and Galloway. And it was felt that with discussions with Scottish Government that it would be wise to see if there was another partner out there that would be willing to come in and support us to deliver that housing for the whole of the region. And through various discussions that we've had with Cunningham Housing Association, we've had 2 or 3 initial meetings with them. We were very happy to proceed with them going forward, and formally invited them to come and look into the ship to see if they could partner us along with our other partner organisations in this Lawburn, DGHP, Irvine, as I've mentioned, and any other partners that wish to come forward and help us support that the housing investment plan. So that is, in case members were wondering, there is text in the body of the report for that. And in a moment, I'll ask the Chief Executive of Cunningham, Frank Sweeney, to step forward and just give us a brief overview of his company and the Housing Association and the way he thinks that things might be able to go forward in Dumfries and Galloway. But just before we go into that as well, the Housing Development Forum that was set up, that this committee agreed to set up, we've just a brief couple of words on that. We've had a couple of meetings since this last committee. I feel they've been very, very positive. I set out at the first forum meeting that we had, that I wanted it to be a very full and frank discussion on all housing matters across the board. And it has turned out that way, and that's the way that I would like to see it continue over the forthcoming years, no matter who's part of that. I think it's been very good. It's identified certain issues and problems that we have across the region in particular sites for housing, whether it be planning issues, infrastructure issues, whatever it may be. But I think it's certainly a very good forum to have those initial discussions going forward, so we can identify them, work with our other agencies to see how we can conclude those issues, and therefore any projects that are brought forward to be included in the SHIP are less likely to be removed from the SHIP going forward because of various issues that were never discussed beforehand. So I think it's been a very positive forum going forward. We do include education, social care partners, NHS, etc. in that forum. So I think it has been a very, very positive way forward, and I do hope that that forum continues in future years. Just one other thing that I'd like to mention for members' information. I say, I'm sure you're aware, because it was you that appointed me as a board member of the Dumfries and Galloway Small Communities Housing Trust. To inform members that I have resigned from that position, and I resigned a good sort of 4 or 5 weeks ago, because I felt that it was compromising my position of chair of this committee because of the declarations of interest that were being discussed there. And my duty, as far as I'm concerned, is to this committee first and foremost. And I resigned from that, and that's why I have not declared an interest in that particular matter later on in the agenda. Okay, thank you. Frank, could I ask you to I don't know, have you got, are you plugged in there? Yes, no, we need to speak you through a microphone, please, if you can, Frank. So, no, can somebody help him there? I'll bring him forward, Jim, if you get a card. We're getting a card forward for you. Frank, as I say, is the Chief Executive of Cunningham Housing Association.
Can you all hear me now? Yep, okay. Thanks very much for the card. Lovely, thank you. Chair, thank you very much. Could I say at the outset, it's an honour and a privilege to be asked to attend this meeting to give you some information on the Cunningham Housing Association group of companies, which comprises Cunningham Housing Association, obviously, which I'll go over with you in a minute, but also our 2 subsidiary companies, Cunningham Furniture Recycling, which deals with reused furniture, and Citrus Energy, which deals with domestic and commercial switching and fuel poverty advice to residents in North and East Ayrshire. And I would obviously be delighted to bring that service down to Dumfries and Galloway. The association was formed in 1984. It's been here for 30 odd years. It's run by a voluntary board of management. It's all volunteers that come into our board, and they take out a £1 share. We are the largest housing association in North Ayrshire and East Ayrshire at 2,700 units, and obviously growing in those 2 financial years. In 2014, the association was awarded the accolade, the UK Landlord of the Year and the UK Small Landlord of the Year. And one of the main reasons why we got these awards is that Cunningham Housing Association, like its strapline, is not more than just a landlord. We bring into our areas training and employment opportunities. We look to get involved in our communities. We build community centres and business centres. And in fact, we've recently built in the last 5 years a centre for pre-5 and out-of-school care. So that gives you a kind of broad view of what Cunningham brings into areas. It's not just about building houses for us. It's about coming in, looking at the communities, doing a hell of a lot of consultation and finding out what are the priorities that they're actually looking for. I would like to take this opportunity in thanking Jim and Neil and his team for being excellent since January. These guys have given us an awful lot of help, and our thanks to them. And due to that thanks, we have the potential, once you pass the SHIP today, to spend £2 million. Now, for any housing association to come into an area and deliver that within a 2 to 3 month period is unheard of. And that is down to the guys on my right. This is our development team. Linda Anderson, our Executive Director of Operations, and Callum Adam, our Senior Development Officer. Unfortunately, Lawrence McCluskey, our development manager, couldn't be here. And these guys have worked tremendously hard, and hopefully we're going to deliver that spend to you. Now, I am confident that with CHA being asked to come into the area, that we can try and spend more than your allocation each year. If you look at our track record in North and East Ayrshire, we have always spent our allocations, and indeed, we've also been asking for more money. And given the amount of money that the Scottish Government are going to be making available to councils over the next 45 years for housing, Dumfries and Galloway, I'm sure, will want to snatch a big, big amount of that money. And CHA is very much about partnership working. Dumfries and Galloway Housing Partnership have been really good over the last couple of months. We're not coming in competition with anybody, right? There's a big enough marketplace here for Cunningham to come in and do what we think with our partners we should be doing. And we'll do it wherever possible in partnership with Dumfries and Galloway Housing Partnership, Lordburn, and any other RSL that's working in the area. We see this very much about being, for the council, our partner, for partner RSLs, and most importantly, for the community, because the more houses that you build, the more people you take off your waiting lists. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Frank. Okay, members, we'll open it up for members' questions. Yes. Okay, we'll start off with Alistair.
Thanks very much indeed. Can I say the gentleman's last remarks in particular certainly resonated with me, because the blunt fact of the matter is that, you know, people are entitled to expect and are desperate to achieve quality, affordable housing and which to live. And at the end of the day, they're not really fussed but who provides it, you know, and it's as simple as that. Welcome them in, as it were, not literally with open arms, but as I say, what will the monitoring arrangements be, Chair? Because, you know, enthused to hear the commitment being given, long enough in the tooth to appreciate, of course, that notwithstanding that, and I don't doubt you for one moment, sir, but there's got to be, you know, robust, detailed monitoring arrangements in place to ensure, in fact, that you know, the timescales and what we're proposing to do are kept to. So, what consideration has been given to that thus far, Chair, and what further consideration will be given to it? Thank you.
Jim, would you like to come in on that?
Yep, thanks, Chair. In terms of operational delivery, what we're looking to do is, for the time being, convene very frequent meetings of the Development Forum so that we can keep an eye on each development in a very detailed way that maybe we haven't done in the past. Where there are significant problems or where there are opportunities that arise, we would propose to take reports on a fairly frequent basis back to Communities Committee, because we think at the moment the move from where we are in terms of the spending and resource planning assumption compared to where we want to be will result in frequent changes to the Strategic Housing Investment Programme. So we wouldn't see, if it's agreed today, as this report and this list of developments being the fixed and final position. We'd propose to come back to committee when required, either to introduce new opportunities or where there are delivery problems, to let members know. But in terms of the operational monitoring of progress, that will happen through the Development Forum, which I think, as the Chair alluded to, is actually working particularly well, I think, and we're picking up lots of problems at an early stage. Where we can solve the problems, that's what we want to do. But where a problem's insurmountable and a project isn't going to be delivered or has to come out or will incur significant delays, we would report back through committee to make sure that there's transparency in the process and we're achieving what members are asking us to do.
Thanks, Chair. As far as I'm concerned, that's helpful, not to say reassuring. Thank you.
And just to come in on that as well, Alistair, you know, it's been made quite clear to us from Scottish Government when we've been having these meetings that through the resource planning assumption, the money is allocated to Dumfries and Galloway. They expect it to be spent within the 3 to 5 year period going forward. So they expect it to be fully utilised within that period. So it is. Obviously there are projects in there for the longer term, but initially, in the first period of projects that we have here, they are expecting the monies to be spent within that timescale. Jim McClung.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just on your last remark there about Scottish Government expecting us to get the money spent, I don't think Jim and his team will have a problem with that. I think in the last 5 years, the Scottish Government have actually come back and asked us to spend more money and gave us more money because we were as good as spending the money that they gave us in the first place. Just on the Cunningham Housing Association, I'm going to welcome them here with open arms as well. Any housing authority, any housing association that wants to come in here and build houses is going to be welcome as far as I'm concerned. I see with the plans that, by my counting, there's over 560. I sat in your chair when we tried to get and eventually managed to get the Common Housing Register up and running. It's just wondering if Cunningham intend to join the Common Housing Register along with DGHP, Lowerburn, and I think it's Irvine is the other one, if they actually intend joining that, because it would make sense to have one of the big RSLs that are now in the area once Cunningham come in to actually be there. The only other thing about Cunningham is it's nice to see all the plans that you've got. There's only one area in the whole of the region that isn't covered. Please assure me that if and when an opportunity arises, you will build in Wigtonshire. That's where I come. It's where I stay.
Is that you, Jim? Yeah.
Yeah, I've got another question on 3.23 and 3.24, but I'll come back in with that when we're finished with Cunningham.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Frank, are you able to fill in, or Jim possibly, as far as joining the Common Housing Register for the allocations policy that we run through this council?
Chair, yes, we're members of 2 Common Housing Registers already. We would obviously like to join the Dumfries and Galloway one. We were waiting to make our application until after this meeting. But yes, we would go to the Common Housing Register, definitely.
And on your point about building in Wigtonshire, I mean, to be fair to Cunningham, Strategic Housing did ask them initially to look into the east of the region, but of course the whole of Dumfries and Galloway will be included in that.
Thanks, Chairman. I think, again, like the rest of the committee, welcome Mr Sweeney, I think you said his name was, as a housing association, representative of that housing association into Dumfries and Galloway. When I first read the report, I have to be honest, I thought it looked like world domination to me when I seen how many was there. But I mean, I do like a competitive edge. I think it's kind of, you put competition there, it starts to success, starts to breed success, doesn't it? So, but no, I wish you all the best in taking forward the potential projects what you've got. I think most of them are obviously a lot. I think just about every site available in my ward, Andale South, has been picked up on within the LDP. So I can see what you're trying to aspire to, and I do, like I say, I wish you all the best with that. Hopefully we'll be able to tap into that level of funding at Scottish Government and put some houses on the ground. One of these, to aside for that, I mean, another thing, I was thinking about, it was 18 years since the last, I used to work with the Water Authority, it was 18 years ago when I left, and at that time there was a problem in the Gretna area when it came to water infrastructure. Oops, apologies for that. Turn that off. Scottish Water's on the phone, it wasn't Scottish Water then. But anyways, and it's still here it is today, the same age-old problem, and I think we really have to be lifting our kind of our aspirations or our aims in regards to that problem. Gretna's got a massive potential for growth in that area with the links, the amount of visitors and so on and so forth that it has, and you're well aware of that if MD is chair, you actually live there. So I think the ship itself, looking at the investment, absolutely first class. Agree with the high level aspirations with that. We'll see out the next 2, 3, 4 years how that starts to pan out. But Gretna has got a real, I suppose, restriction that most other settlements haven't got. And I would like to have a wee discussion about how do we really get that addressed. I see this, think maybe £30,000 as an allocation towards infrastructure, water infrastructure within the ship there. But I'd like to get, I think we should really lift it as high as we can because we have got a lot of potential down there which is not being realised.
Thanks, Ian. Just to come in on that, yeah, I mean, when we were the last Housing Development Forum meeting that we had, and Cunningham were present, and the various projects were put before us, I actually pointed out the fact that there was this infrastructure problem with Scottish Water in Gretna, and went back through the history of that. And as you say, it's been going on for for decades now, and Scottish Water really need to make that investment to allow Gretna to develop and grow. During the last big housing boom that there was, Gretna was stagnant because Scottish Water wouldn't allow development going forward with that. And we can't allow that to happen again. It's gone on for too long. But through that, and again, our partners in Scottish Government were sitting at that table, and they recognise that there is an opportunity here to develop out in Gretna with all the sites that are available included in the development plan at the moment, and that's where we've asked Cunningham to look at across the region, the ones that we've already allocated within the plan, so that there is no real planning issues in that respect. But from the Scottish Water perspective, yes, it was highlighted that it would be an issue going forward, and from that very meeting with Scottish Government sitting there as well, they and it's in the report now that we're asking that we take Gretna forward into the investment fund, Scottish Government Investment Fund, to apply to that for water-related issues in Gretna. We have a meeting arranged on the 29th of March with the heads of Scottish Water, in which we'll be discussing this, and we'll be looking for some ideas of costings from them on taking this forward. But they are aware now that it is paramount that we move this issue forward, because otherwise it won't be solved overnight. We're well aware of that, but we need to start getting things moving. I believe that Scottish Water have now got a holding reservoir in their capital programme for Gretna moving forward. So that is a move, but whether this is part of the pressure that's been put on them as well from ourselves as a council and a strategic partner. But I think it's eventually starting to move, and they're recognising that there is that restraint in Gretna that needs to be sorted, so that we as a strategic housing authority, as well as our partners across the region, are able to fulfil our commitments to the ship. And it doesn't matter what the infrastructure problems that may arise throughout the region, then we'll be able to sit down and look at that and hopefully resolve them in an amicable manner and take things forward. But Jim, do you want to come in on anything with that?
Yep, thanks, Chair. It's just to let members know that the Housing Infrastructure Fund, the budget for that's been set at £50 million. And we've made the Scottish Government aware that this report's coming in front of members today, and that if members agree the report's recommendations, that Gretna will be the Council's strategic priority to bid into that fund. My understanding is to deal with the reservoir problem, it's several £1 million worth of capital expenditure, but we want to take that bid forward. And we've had some initial discussions with Scottish Water, and they seem quite supportive of what we're trying to do at this point in time.
Willie?
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and substitute for Graham if that is at all possible for anyone to substitute for Graham. However, Frank referred there to being brought in to utilise or try and use the £2 million, and I think that's the issue that is most welcome. And if Cunningham can do that, then all the better that we do utilise that £2 million for the housing needs. But it's to the point of the housing needs, and there will be a common need throughout the whole of Dumfries and Galloway by the sheer nature of the waiting list. But then there are other needs in different areas, and in Jim referred to in Wigtonshire, in Stranraer, there are young people who have been in homeless accommodation for an inordinate time, and some have not reached the bottom rung in terms of being capable of sustaining their own tenancy, and are still waiting on assessment and so forth, and some who have just waited because the proper or suitable accommodation has not come out. So I want to know how flexible this will be in terms of the £2 million to build for what is needed. And on the last time that I sat in Housing Committee, or at least the Housing Forum, I'm sure Jim can remember it, was that we did commission a housing needs report. I just can't remember the name of the lady, but that identified a number of needs throughout Dumfries and Galloway. Whether we've ever returned to address that is another issue, because again, I look at, and I'm looking at James, and James has been very receptive and accommodating in providing for people who do need, through Strategic Needs Group panel, And I think that was highlighted at the last subcommittee, the housing subcommittee, in terms of people who have gone through and who need an adaptation to their house, and whether this money would accommodate that, or at least there would be houses built for their needs within the strategic needs group panel in terms of providing for them. And this again ties into bed blocking, where we have many issues in there, and people are there because the houses are not suitable for them to return home. So there's a massive amount of work needed for more than the 2 million that we require for Dumfries and Galloway to meet the needs. Not always those that are on the waiting list, but there are others. And my last point I was interested to hear, and I may pick you up at some time, Frank, and Jim and I's had, I don't know how many meetings in terms of anti-poverty, in terms of fuel poverty, where we have excessive amount of accommodation where people are paying more than 10% of their income and are in fuel poverty and suffering as a result. Whether indeed there is anything we can do with the 2 million. You know, I'm trying to stretch that 2 million as far as almost for Cunningham down to Stranraer or further in Dumfries and Galloway before I'm accused of being parochial.
Okay, thank you, Willie. But just with regards to the housing need, and you mentioned homelessness people, etc., etc., we have just completed a new housing needs and assessment statement, and that has been given credible status by Scottish Government. So they've looked over that and they're happy, and all these facts and figures have been dealt with within that. I'll let Harry speak in a minute on that. But again, when we sit at the development forum meetings that we have our NHS partners with us, we have social work, we have education. So we're able to look at all this. The programmes in the SHIP are for new developments going forward, and that's what Scottish Government are interested in at the moment. But there are other avenues. We do support other avenues for energy efficiency and such through the HEAPS ABS programme and all different measures like that as well for fuel poverty. And of course, as a council, we're looking to try and eradicate that as much as we possibly can. Harry?
Thanks, Chair. Just before Jim comes in, certainly Councillor Scobie mentioned the homelessness service, and it's just to reassure members that a feature on an ongoing basis of the Coming Housing Register Board is our collective statutory responsibilities for dealing with homelessness, and quite clearly, whilst the regulator is in regular dialogue with ourselves in terms of the improvement plan that members have signed off and been monitoring over the last 18 months, the RSLs have clearly got a key role to play in helping us tackle homelessness as well.
I'll let Jim come in.
Yep, thanks, Chair. In terms of the kind of housing strategy going forward, members agreed we'd put in place a strategic housing forum, and I'm hoping that all members of Housing Sub have now received, an invite to that meeting on the 14th of March. That will be the first stage of the Council developing its new local housing strategy, and then that provides the opportunity for all stakeholders to identify the strategic priorities for housing investment going forward, and provides us an opportunity to look at the areas across the region that we want to prioritise new housing development. In terms of the approach to homelessness, that meeting of the Strategic Housing Forum as well, we're going to draw a group from that will take forward the development of the Council's homelessness strategy next week as well. So both of those pieces of work will move forward in parallel because they both inform each other. And really what we're trying to do going forward is to help the RSLs deliver the Council's key strategic priorities. So in some ways more going forward, hopefully we'll be in a better position to be saying to Cunningham Housing Association, DGHP, Lord Burn and our other strategic partners, this is where we would like you to develop. We're not quite there yet because we're trying to maximise the use of spend right now, but ideally what we're wanting to do is be more strategic going forward and more clearly define where we want to see development take place across the region, and the development of the new local housing strategy will provide that opportunity, and that will also take full account of the findings from the housing needs and demand assessment, because the whole point is the local housing strategy is supposed to be an evidence-based approach. We want to use that evidence to determine what we do. So I think going forward, we'll begin to see a much stronger relationship between the local housing strategy and the strategic housing investment plan, and the links will become more apparent over the next year.
Really?
Yeah, we didn't hear back from Frank, but however, I'm heartened by what Jim has said only last week, you know, and it's not an isolated case. I dealt with one where the young person is just not capable to sustain his own tenancy and return back to supported accommodation that we have in Stranraer. But it's how do we move individuals forward where there's a lot more needed. And I know Lorburn, spoken to Lorburn, and they're looking at that in terms of not just provide, because supported lodgings doesn't always deliver what the young people need, or indeed anyone who suffers from any form of mental health illness, and they require a different kind of accommodation. So it's looking at that, as Jim is saying, moving it forward with our health partners so that we are not displacing some person who lives in Stranraer and saying, you know, your accommodation is in Dumfries. Even that may not be suitable. So I take heart from what Jim's saying and moving the strategic needs forward rather than just saying, you know, we've got money, we've got to make sure that money reaches as many people who require the support and accommodation that meets their needs.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, I'm very much in favour of the new sites being added to the SHIP, and I very much welcome the additional housing which will be coming to this region. I mean, everybody knows the problem we have with housing as we have across Scotland, across the UK generally. So just a question of committing the money. It's also a question of building the houses at the end of the day. It's not good just having all these promises and not bring them to fulfilment. I was interested in what Frank was saying about Cunningham Housing Association's commitment not only to build houses, but build communities as well. And I think, in addition to what Willie was saying about the homeless, what we also need to do is to concentrate more on sheltered housing, because we have got a very demographics mean we've got a very aging population down here who are capable of living on their own, but they do need the support to give them the security to do so. So I hope we do take that very much into account. I also welcome the commitment to the close monitoring of progress of developments, because once again we need to drive these projects forward in order to get the houses built for the people to live in. And turning to you, James, if you remember at the September meeting of the Housing Subcommittee, we were told that provided additional funding for the Vennel project, work would start in October. When I walked past there last week, I think, there's no sign of any progress whatsoever. And I see in the spreadsheet on page 9, you're looking for funding of £350,000. Now, speaking to constituents and also community councils, people are becoming very, very cynical about that site on the Vennel. You know, it seems to be a black hole for funding, and there's nothing at all happening. You know, you could have built Trump Towers more or less for the amount of money which we've committed to developing that site. And as I said, people are becoming very cynical. It's a very obvious place within the town that we need to do something about. So could you give us an update on where we are with that and when construction genuinely will start?
Yeah, I have to agree that this committee did agree to extra funding at our last meeting, but it was in the proviso that works on site would start imminently once that funding was awarded. And I agree with you, Jeff, that funding was awarded by this committee, but yet there's been no further progress. James, are you able to come in with some information?
Thanks. Thanks, Jeff. And just to confirm, DGHP is absolutely grateful for the funding that was awarded back in October, the extra 350, but that was only half of what we required. The government also undertook to give us the other half of what was required in terms of the extra costs, and that took a bit longer to get from the government. We now have that. The contract is let back in early February time. The contractor's first tasks are to go and stabilise the buildings next door and the stitching and putting all the rods and so on. That has started in the buildings next door. You probably won't see much action in terms of the building going up for another 2 or 3 months. The way the foundations are working, it's ring beams and piling foundation layouts that go in. So a lot of the work is in the actual ground itself before you'll start to see visible signs of the building going up. But the contract is let. They have started in the adjacent buildings, just kind of stabilising the cracks and so on. There was one further issue came up between October and now, in that we had an agreement to let the car park on the sands, and unfortunately that seems to have now the council are going through a process of purchasing that. So we needed a further agreement with the council to extend our lease agreement to next Easter time. The contract itself is 56 weeks, so we're expecting a completion by the end of March next year. So I don't know if there's any other information I can give you at this stage, Jeff.
Well, I welcome the fact there is actually work going on, despite the fact that we can't see it, and especially members of the public can't see it, because the site itself is a total mess in the Venel. So the very least I could ask you to do is to tidy it up a wee bit whilst the work's going on. I mean, you know, it's now a general dumping ground, which doesn't look good at all.
Yeah. Okay, that's no problem, Jeff. We'll do that. And I think once the project finishes, it'll be, you know, a fantastic addition to the Venel itself.
Okay, thanks. Jim, you want to come back on some previous comments made?
Thanks, Chair. It's just to pick up on Councillor Lever's point about the ageing population and Councillor Scobie's point about housing for people with particular needs. Members will see in the appendix of the SHIP report on page 9 that we've got arrangements in place through a locality housing leads group that works across the adult health and social care integration arrangements. And one of the significant steps that's been made there is that the Integration Joint Board have agreed to fund a temporary post for a period of 1 year to help develop housing for people with particular needs across the region. And in fact, it's Sheila that's here today that has in fact got that post. So we're very much working closely with colleagues in health and social work and looking at the potential to deliver innovative new projects through the Strategic Housing Investment Programme that meets a range of needs. So it's not purely concentrating on mainstream housing. We're also looking at new projects for housing suitable for the needs of older people in Stranraer. There's the potential of a foyer project. We're looking at if we can consider new housing development alongside new ways of delivering health and social care in particular localities. And all those discussions are ongoing at the moment. And as I say, we're working closely with colleagues in these other organisations to try and achieve that.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Jim Dempster.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's an interesting project that Jim outlined, and it probably deals with one of the issues that is prevalent in my ward, and I'm sure it'll be across many wards. Is that we have maybe properties now, but they're the wrong type. There's not the same demand for 3-bedroom properties now, and it's how we manage the new build to reflect the needs of today. And I'm also interested in the other relic that we've got hanging around when Jeff talks about driving projects forward, and that's all primary school in Sanker. There's something like 150 extant permissions in Sanker currently, and no brick being laid, and I think it's an absolute scandal. Most of them are no registered social landlords, I have to say, but nevertheless, there isn't a brick being laid in a community to support the need for additional housing. So I'm kind of looking at James for a response, because I see in this paper that we have before us the project approval date for the old primary schools 2018. And I thought that had already gone through that process, and it was mere the planning stage we were struggling with, because there's also the application for demolition, but it has to be in conjunction with design for new build, because planners now won't allow a demolition until there's a replacement in place that they're content with, and it's a single decision, no a staggered process. So I'm kind of disappointed that it would appear to be next year, unless I'm reading the report wrong, James, that says you're going to get permission from your board, or you're going to grant permission to look for a developer, because it's one of the 1999 I started this campaign, I'll be dead. I'll have some in my head stain that will say he tried really hard in terms of the old primary school. But and I know you gave me some comfort that the application for a planning permission is imminent. I mean, just give me a bit of more reassurance about the start date and what's actually happening, rather than what it says in the papers here.
James, are you able to add any information for that?
Needs to work. There we go. Thanks, Jim. And just to give you a wee bit of background about the Sanker School, it is a listed building. We have had some issues with Historic Scotland, and in principle, they are saying that we can go ahead and demolish that building now. And as a result, we are now in a position where we can submit the planning application. I'm not sure what these figures say, Jim, but I'm trying to follow the lines. But we're intending to get that on site next year, to get a planning application, all the building warrants and so on through, and get that started in the next financial year. So it's not what it says here in 2 years' time, it's next year we're trying to be on site with that.
And you have all the necessary support for the board, all the approvals. If the planning application is successful, you'll be in a position to look for a contractor to carry out the work.
Yeah. Everything that appears on here has already been through our board and has been approved at our board for funding. So everything in here has got DGHP's commitment to taking forward. And the process for us is to put planning application in, hopefully over the next week, to then follow up with building warrants and so on. Usually that process takes a few months, the tender process. So we're probably looking at a Q3 site start for the next financial year.
I might not be here, but I'd still like a go at cutting the ribbon.
I think I think the message is quite clear coming across from members that of all projects, no matter who the delivery partner is, of all the projects that we have before us, and we agree to and we are able to draw down funding for, I think all members are keen that all these projects are looked at and taken forward as expeditiously as is actually possible to do so, because we don't just want to agree funding for any particular project or development and sit on it for 2 or 3 years. We need to see these developed out and actually delivered for this council, and that is one of the main messages I think should be going out to all our partners. Okay, I have no further matter. Ian?
Thank you, Chairman. I left it just in case somebody else will bring it up, but something when I did look through the SHIP that sprung to mind was first-time buyers. We've done that in the past, I think, through new supply shared equity. I think maybe DGHP had a project that they took some of them forward. I just wondered, maybe it's for the next council to take forward, but I think we should be looking at right across the whole board when it comes to investment in regards to housing stock, Dumfries and Galloway. And I'm getting more and more issues raised, you could say, or certainly queries in regards from my constituents about people wanting to get on the first rung of the ladder of the housing market. So I think we should be considering that as we go forward as well. First-time buyers, we've done it in the past. I think we should be driving, whether it's social landlord, private sector, whoever it is that actually delivers that. See the 36k that we're putting into the infrastructure at Gretna, what do we actually get for that? That's the second question. What do we actually get for the 36,000?
We'll ask Jim for that. But on 3.23, it tells you there that we're in discussion with Scottish Futures Trust on ways that we can help seek funding for first-time buyers and low-cost home ownership going forward with that. But I'll let Jim come in and add to that if you can answer the second phase on the money we're putting forward for Scottish Water.
To be honest, Chair, the solution to the Gretna problems located within the bid to the Scottish Government's infrastructure fund. So I'm not entirely sure what figure it is that Councillor...
I'm looking at the appendix, and it says in the infrastructure fund, the 36k allocated for Gretna, water supply infrastructure, it says, table 3. I just wonder what that 36k was for.
Thanks, Chair. I can only conclude that is in fact a typographical error, because the solution to the infrastructure problem in Gretna is in excess of millions of pounds. So I suppose in direct answer to your question, £36,000 wouldn't touch it. So really, the focus of the work's going to be a much bigger bid to the national fund. Maybe that figure's referring to connections to the existing infrastructure. But as I say, it's a much bigger problem that I believe potentially involves the construction of a new reservoir, and £36,000 wouldn't go near that.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I know, because it does refer in the report as well, I think, to 2009 when Policy and Resources, certainly the Corporate Policy Committee of the Dumfries and Galloway Council at the time, they made a commitment, and there's developers' contributions in regards to that. Maybe it's something linked to that, but I just wondered what the detail was.
Jim McClung?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I said I'd come back in on 3.23 and 3.24, and you made reference to it in answering Ian's first question about the low-cost houses for buying and things like that. But it says on the last sentence that it will form the basis of a future report for members' consideration. Have we any idea when we're likely to get a report on this project?
Jim?
Yep, thanks, Chair. It's the new project's been developed by the Scottish Futures Trust are at the very early stages of their development, and I don't think there's any actually on site across Scotland at the moment. I think they're very close to getting one delivered in one local authority area, and there'll be a lot of learning will flow from the implementation of that project. We're actually in active dialogue with the Scottish Futures Trust, and they've been down to a meeting of the Locality Housing Leads Group and explained how the project would work to that group. But we're waiting to see what learning comes from the implementation in the first local authority area, and then that will trigger a report back to Communities Committee about the detail of how it could work. The basic principle is there's two strands to it. One's housing potentially suitable for the needs of older people, and the other one's housing that's targeted at first-time buyers. And like an underlying principle in both projects is that the council, to make the funding mechanism work, would need to, in either model, contribute land as part of the overall funding mechanism, and it's quite detailed. But as I say, it's very, very new, and we're one of the local authorities that are involved just in discussing the possibilities that are there. That's why it's quite qualified in the report, because there isn't actually a project on the ground to refer to at this point in time.
Okay, I have Willie next.
Yeah, Chair. I take it we're moving on. I want to make reference to page 9. Jim's already touched, not on this one, but 7.1. And he's made a number of reference to older people. And it's good housing is essential prerequisite for well-being and is a centre to addressing some of the most pressing health challenges in Scotland. And that I agree with. But, you know, myself and Graham Foster went forward to the Chief Executive of the Health Board with a particular idea. So, and this was for Stranraer, and it's, I'm sure James can speak for, you know, in terms of land acquisition, acquiring land and that's fit for purpose and so forth, is very difficult. But your opening remarks was that you were open to discussion with anybody who wants to come and speak to us. That's correct in terms of our RSLs. But I just wondered if this extends into the private sector, where there are other ESSA scheme in Stranraer that's looking at care cottage development to deal with people who are in hospital or who no longer feel they want to stay at home but want the support built around their accommodation, not always requiring 24-hour care, but want to feel that it's available to them, that it's at hand. And I just wonder, because that was one that met with huge, almost, you know, that was over the moon at the idea in Stranraer, but it seems to have gone cold somewhat in terms of that we don't seem to identify the needs in the area. And I just wondered in terms of this development, you know, or working in partnership, whether we maximise the asset by also looking at our for our RSLs to facilitate that, but also the private sector, you know, where there is an opportunity for that type of development in terms of older people coming out of hospital that no longer want to live on their own or whatever, and that 24-hour care that they don't require, but they want to feel safe and comfortable that it's to hand through hub or whatever, that kind of development, if that is still open and being pursued.
I certainly know that through discussions we've had. I mean, obviously through the the health and integration side of it now, it's the IJB that's taken on the responsibility of that. But of course, they're still one of our partners, and we have had discussions with them about the type of housing and support needed going forward, and that we can look at through our RSL delivery partners in supplying that as well in particular sites going forward. Jim, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, obviously, the purpose of the Strategic Housing Investment Plan is to deal with projects that are delivered through the Council's Scottish Government's Affordable Housing Investment Programme. So, in essence, the core purpose of the SHIP is to deal with affordable housing development that receives subsidy through the Scottish Government, and that's that complies with the guidance around the SHIP. So, any developments that are included within it are those that are supported by the Scottish Government, that are going to receive funding through the programme, and basically other private development that isn't applying for public subsidy isn't really a matter to be included within the Strategic Housing Investment Plan. But in terms of general principles, we're working with health and social work colleagues across the region to deliver a number of projects along the lines that Councillor Scobie's describing. So, for example, we're working with Sheila at the moment to look at the possibility of developing housing suitable for the needs of older people in Moffat, in Langham, in Stranraer, in Upper Nithsdale, in Sanquhar. So there's a number of projects looking to address those issues, but unless it's going to require subsidy from the Scottish Government, it wouldn't be appropriate to consider it within the terms of the Strategic Housing Investment Plan.
Thanks, Jim. George?
Thanks, Chair. Just a very quick question on page 3 about, you know, the various bullet points. Cotton Street, Castle Douglas, whereabouts is that, Jim?
Yep, thanks. I had a meeting with Cunningham Housing Association this morning on that one. I believe it's the old abattoir site.
Well, I sort of thought that's where. Has that site been decontaminated?
I mean, in terms of our role, if you don't mind, I'll refer back to Frank, because our role is to determine the strategic priority. In terms of site investigations and the stage of actual developments, I'm not sure if it's gone down to that level of detail yet, but I know some work about purchase has taken place. So if you don't mind, I'll ask Frank or James to answer.
In the spirit of partnership, thank you, Frank. Cotton Street is very early days. As far as I know, there has been an SI done and the contamination has been identified, but it hasn't been cleared yet. I think all the kind of old rubble and bricks are still there as well. So they need to carry out a scrape before anything's done on that site. I think it had planning permission, which has run out for 16 odd units. So no, the answer is no.
I think, just a comment here, I think it'll be a fairly big operation, but that site's been lying derelict for a good number of years now. And to the best of my knowledge, there's been no decontamination work done at all. You know?
I'm sure if there's any site remediation to take place, that DGHP and Cunningham will be looking at within the figures as well coming forward. Okay, finally, last speaker, Alistair.
Thanks very much, Chair. What I would say in relation to George's inquiry, that hopefully the development will go ahead, hopefully houses will be built on it. It'll be interesting at the end of the day when you come to name them. Bearing in mind there's a Slaughterhouse, Bray and Newton Stewart. But seriously, Chair, because ultimately it is a serious issue, has there ever been, any sort of contemplation given in appropriate, and I stress in appropriate circumstances, to the council as strategic housing authority, perhaps getting involved with a view to expediting the process and land acquisition matters? Tell you why I'm raising it. Previous life, what used to happen, and Wally can vouch for it, was that you got your allocation at the beginning of the year, and more often than not, you had to negotiate with local landowners with a view to buying land to start developing your houses within the financial year. These people weren't stupid. They realised that they had you across a barrel, and they weren't particularly always too inclined, to sort of conduct the negotiations through to an early conclusion. We did ultimately put a stop to that. We bought the farm and lands of Low Ochterlure, and we sold off bits of that, to the council, but then the regional council, for Belmont Primary School and to various private housing developers, and it worked a treat, Chair. Some of the members for Doon-the-Machers weren't too happy about it, and but as I say, it worked a treat. And I wonder if in appropriate circumstances there would be a locus and a role, or indeed the power, available to this council as strategic housing authority, as it were, to get involved in a similar process. I'm not suggesting we make policy in the hoof, merely something that's occurred to me during the course of the debate and listening to colleagues and yourself.
I'm not so sure on that, but Jim or Harry, are you able to add to that? Because obviously we don't have that availability of subsidy from Scottish Government to come direct to us for that. But,
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The way that we're trying to deal with the issue that Councillor Geddes is describing is working very closely with colleagues in strategic planning and the development of the main issues report. So one of the things that planning colleagues are trying to do through the main issues report is allocate a very generous land supply for future housing development, and certainly a land supply that's capable of delivering the amount of development we're looking to achieve over the next 5 years. As part of that process, they've gone through a very detailed process of looking at the effectiveness of housing sites across the region. And one of the key considerations there is that there's been a number of landowners across the region that in effect have sat on sites, not released them for sale, and hoped that one bright day somebody will come along with loads of money and purchase the site. And sites have remained within the local development plan for many years on that basis. But my understanding is through the current call for sites and through the current approach to land allocations that colleagues in strategic planning are paying very close attention to those particular circumstances. And it's not now simply good enough for a landowner to say, I would like that to remain included, thank you very much, in the hope that they may achieve their optimum purchase price at a later date. The test will be, is that site available for any housing developer to purchase rather than the landowner's aspiration? And in terms of the I suppose, the ability of landowners to maximise their return on their site, the way that land's purchased for inclusion in the Strategic Housing Investment Plan, my understanding is it's based on an independent valuation, and that's for the delivery of affordable housing, and it's that forms the basis of discussions. And because the housing market in Dumfries and Galloway is still, I think, pretty sluggish at the moment, what we're finding is that land supply isn't a particular constraint at the moment. So at this point in time, I suppose my short answer would be I don't think it's particularly necessary to go down that particular route, because there is no problem identifying land at this point in time. But it could be something that's considered at a later date if it became a problem.
Very grateful for the helpful response as always, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, members, can I take you to the recommendations, please? 2.1, agree to include the new sites set out at section 3.3 of this report in the Strategic Housing Investment Plan. 2.2, agree to submit the final draft of the Strategic Housing Investment Plan set out in the appendices of this report to the Scottish Government. And 2.3, agree to prioritise a bid to the Scottish Government's Housing Infrastructure Fund that is focused on Gretna to unlock the supply of new affordable housing at this location. And 2.4, to note the actions taken to increase Dumfries and Galloway's capacity to deliver new affordable housing as described at the sections of this report. Thank you, members. Move on to item 4, which was a separate report to the committee papers. The scheme of assistance. Can I ask, Harry, have you anything to add to the report?
Clearly, as you say, Chair, there was potentially material considerations associated with the budget development process, which members will be fully aware of. So hence why it was felt appropriate that this to be a late item to make sure it contained absolutely factual information. So nothing really to add, Chair. We'll be happy to take any questions.
Members? Jeff?
Just on 3.5, the Town Centre Living Fund, we actually carried out a survey of the spaces above the commercial premises in Dumfries Town Centre a few years ago. And because at that time we had an office down the bottom of the Vennel, so we came to have a look around to see if it was suitable. Do you have any feedback on what was actually the result of that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I don't think that was through Strategic Housing Services.
Well, could I suggest then that, Jim, if you could have a look into that, and if it is, pass on the information to Councillor Lever, be the best way forward. Okay, thanks. Alistair?
As far as I'm concerned, Chair, I think the recommendations contained in the report are eminently sensible, and I have no compunction whatsoever in saying we should be adopting these. However, just one wee point, and I appreciate that it's a public meeting when I'm asking it. Paragraph 3.7, sir, trusted trader scheme, good scheme. But what they're talking about top of the page is that 16 applications have been rejected and 14 traders have been removed from the scheme. I would be interested to know the reasons for that, sir. Bearing in mind, as I've already said, that I don't want to pour over the entrails of any particular application, just in general. I presume that it implies a significant degree of monitoring, and that's good. But as I say, it would be helpful to know just exactly why. Thank you.
We have Sandra Harkness here from Trade and Standards, who I'm sure will be happy to answer your question.
With relation to the traders who've been removed or asked to be removed from the scheme, I won't be naming any, but mainly it's because they haven't provided the feedback that's required, because one of the members to ask the customer feedback, and that's on the scheme. And if they don't do that, the scheme kind of fails. It doesn't really, it's not as successful because it needs that.
Grateful for the response, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, I have Jim Dempster next.
Thanks, Chair. Happy with the report. I'm pleased that the Town Centre Living Fund is spread across the whole of the region, because we've often said here that many of our town centres are blighted by derelict and abandoned buildings, which brings me to my point. And it's not for today, obviously, because we know the committee that deals with it. But I'm absolutely fed up of waiting for a derelict building strategy that was supposed to be brought to EI committee. I'll guarantee it's 2 or 3 years ago. It would have worked hand in glove with this particular project or this scheme now. And it seems to me it's been lost in the midst of time, and it's a shame.
Okay, Jim. Can we move on? Willie, next speaker.
Thank you, Chair, and I seek your guidance on this one, or officer's guidance on this one, particularly Harry. There's a number of references in here to vulnerable people, and indeed in 3.72, almost on its conclusion, protecting our most vulnerable people and being an inclusive council, and housing plays a big issue, and where we find the referrals to the food banks, not the food train. The food train's got a separate function in terms of delivering shopping to people, etc., etc. Saying that they're okay and everything else that go with it, and totally, fully support the food train. But I'm looking at the report in terms of anti-poverty, whether this has passed anti-poverty in terms of, is there something we could be doing because there will be many people living in homes who are suffering. I've referred to the fuel poverty, but there's also ones who will find it difficult to feed their wains and so forth. And I say that with the greatest respect to them. They're living in abject poverty, and I just wonder if this scheme could possibly take cognizance of that situation and fact, and maybe there's some way that we can ameliorate the difficulty, the abject poverty that they are facing with this scheme.
It's my belief, but I'll pass it on in a minute, that with the referrals to the food train extra come from actually the food train itself, from the volunteers that go out and, as I say, deliver the shopping, etc. So they're able to see how people are coping in their own living situations, depending on their health or their well-being, and they can refer on to food train extra if there are small particular jobs to be done around the house, which is what that's about. It's separate to the handy van, which we also have in place here, which is a more tradesman-focused sort of jobs that are needed and required. But the food train extra is just those small change in the light bulbs, etc., that odd people need doing in the properties. But James, are you able to come in on this at all? And
Mr. Chair, yeah, as said, Councillor Peacock has already said there, the food train extra really is about supporting people to remain in their properties. And they obviously link up with a lot of other organisations through the third sector, so there will be work around poverty as well. It's not something that's specifically mentioned.
Yeah, Chair, I've got to come back, and I hear what you're saying. I hear what was just said in the last report. I only picked up last week's paper, and it was the Galloway Gazette, and what it's, I think that was the one that said that the Marcus food bank is fast running out of provision. I just wonder, we can change the light bulbs, we can do all, but, if hunger is the issue, whether there is a tie-up, recognising, as it does, and there's vulnerable people, and I referred to 3.72, in terms of people who can hardly feed themselves or don't have the wherewithal to provide for their children and so forth. I just wonder if there's a tie-up between this and our anti-poverty strategy, which is, a fundamental to the principles of our council moving forward.
I'll bring Harry in on this one, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Scobie mentions protecting our most vulnerable people, which is mentioned in section 3.7.2. That was specifically in relation to the Trusted Trader scheme, which I presume is about vulnerable old people, perhaps, that are maybe trying to get work done in the house and want to have the confidence. But absolutely, in terms of one of the key focuses of our anti-tackling poverty agenda is about sharing of information, that we don't work in silos, that work of one organisation is complementary to another. So if, for example, there's some information that one particular partner would pick up that could be passed to another agency or part of the council, that's exactly what we want to look at. But the reference to protecting the most vulnerable is specifically in relation to the Trusted Trader scheme in the context of this particular report.
I take that point, Chair, and I've already said that I was looking for advice, and perhaps we should be looking at the reports where we refer to vulnerable people, that it does pass the test of anti-poverty, and that we are addressing the very issue that Harry, because this is something that Harry said we want to do, when perhaps we should be doing. That would be my only point, and that we are working as across the board as a collaborative council and dealing with the issues.
I have Alistair and then Jim McClung.
If I can crave your indulgence, Chair, I'd like to go back briefly, I hope, to the point that Jim raised about the town centre scheme. I think it's very helpful for him to point out, in fact, that it's no simply a town centre scheme. It talks about, and the template, town centres and settlements are a key element of the economic, social and environmental fabric of the region. And I would have thought, quite frankly, that when we develop this, we should be looking for a win-win situation, because I think in the first instance we should be looking at addressing the problems of dereliction at the same time as addressing this. Now, we've asked the Wigan Area Committee for a report on the council's powers and, more importantly, its political will to tackle dereliction. It's been scheduled for several months, and I bet on myself, I must confess, that we'll not see it this side of the council elections, and that's what's been too wrong with this issue. The wider communities in Dumfries and Galloway, Chair, are exercising, rightly so, with the issue of dog fouling. And I'm not trying to be disparaging, to community councils, etc. But I would venture to suggest that a significant majority of the elected members in this chamber are of the view that something really needs to be done, to address the issues of dereliction. And I think, quite frankly, it's little short of shameful that it's taking so long to address this in a meaningful fashion. And here, as far as I'm concerned, as something which should, Chair, help us to focus on that. I'm totally supportive of the concept of town centres and settlements, but as I say, in the short term and in the first instance, let's focus on the derelict properties, as it were, which could be used, and you'd finish up with a win-win situation. You would improve, the look of the centres. You'd get rid of dereliction. It would help, and people. There's a health and well-being issue there as well. And at the same time, you're providing a desperately needed resource, i.e., housing resource. And to me, I would hope that going forward, will not the same sort of lack of political will with a small p in commitment that I'm sorry to say, in my opinion, has been displayed for far too long. I'll leave it at that, and I'm grateful to you for indulging me. Thank you.
No, I totally agree with you, Alistair, and I'm sure our delivery partners here will be able to hear that loud and clear as well. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I hear what Willie's saying, and I don't think anybody was surprised that I would want as much spent on anti-poverty as we can. However, the vast majority of the stuff that's in here, although it's linked, and obviously we consider the anti-poverty, but the vast majority of this is, a lot of it's council tax for second homes, which can only be spent in a certain way. We can't just move it from one and spend it in anti-poverty, however much we would like to.
Okay then, members, I have no further members down to speak. So can we go to the recommendations? Members are asked to agree 2.1, agree 2.2, agree 2.3, agree 2.4, note 2.5, and note 2.6. Thank you. Okay, members, thank you. Moving on, item 5, Small Communities Housing Trust. Purpose of the report is to seek members' consideration to a funding request by the Dumfries and Galloway Small Communities Housing Trust. Harry, have you anything to add to the report?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Okay, I'm happy to open it up to members. Alistair?
I think you and I are well aware of the issues that we've had from time to time with this particular organisation in the past. As far as I'm concerned, Chair, that's in the past. It would seem to me that under their new stewardship, they are in fact going forward. And I would like to think in the circumstances that we would be prepared, as it were, to meet the 100% of the funding for this post. And on the time scale that we're talking about, subject to the proviso, as I've said earlier today, Chair, that we have in place robust monitoring arrangements, which assure us that we're getting value for money, and that the post is being properly used, clearly defined remit, clearly defined targets and outcomes, and it will be used to achieve these. And on that basis, with these provisos, I would suggest, in fact, that I would have no problems with funding, as it were, the post 100%. So I'm interested, as always, to hear what colleagues and yourself have got to say on that.
Members? Ian?
I feel very much the same as Alistair. As long as those robust, I suppose, performance parameters are in place, I think. I mean, absolutely 100% agree with allow it to continue on without having to look for another match fund at this moment in time. But I find them quite a valuable organisation in regards to this housing subcommittee and the Dumfries and Galloway Council when it comes to delivering our issues we have in a small community. So happy to support the full allocation as Alice has already moved, I think.
Jeff?
Thanks, Chair. 332, it says that they've made applications to a number of potential funding streams to try and secure match funding. None was successful. Do you have any background as to why they're unsuccessful?
We have Mike Staples here, who's the CEO of the trust. Mike, could you just specifically on that point as to the failure of your match funding requests from alternate funders?
Okay, sorry. Yes, in respect to funding applications, I think first, broadly speaking, it's worth mentioning that we're finding it's a particularly difficult time, and it's being reported across the board that it's a particularly difficult time for funding for charities, for the charitable sector and for the community development sector across the board, particularly for operational funding. And whilst there is funding around for project delivery, it's certainly a common facet, and it's something that we're finding with a number of the community organisations that we're working with. We made applications in particular to the Annandale and Nithsdale Community Benefit Company and the SSE Strategic Development Fund, which were unsuccessful. It was reported to us that success related to a perception of impact of the projects not being related to individual communities and being aimed at a number of communities across the board. Our issues with LEADER, which was an area of funding that we really had hoped would prove successful, actually related to the requirement under the current LEADER criteria that the funding be aimed at a new project. And as much as we endeavoured to position what we were doing towards a new project, the requirement was going to be that we would have to actually start working with a brand new set of communities. And as the committee are already aware, we're working at quite an advanced stage, particularly relative to the Rural Housing Fund, with a number of existing small communities across the region. And we weren't in a position to neglect those communities and start afresh with this post. And from that perspective, actually, because the previous decision from this committee for match funding had related to an existing post, that caused some issues in that respect as well. The other point that's perhaps worth noting is that the match funder for the council up to this point in time has been the Robertson Trust, who had funded the post for 3 years, and at the moment we're on our required 1 year break from our funding from the Robertson Trust. And it is our hope that following the year we will be able to resurrect that relationship.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Jim Dempster.
I would like to know how many years we've already funded this organisation, because it seems to me that every year we get an application for 1 year's funding, and it's starting to look like a dependency culture, and we're trying very hard as a council to move away from continually funding projects year after year after year, because then we are just simply the place of first request instead of last. I'd also be interested to know if there's any money themselves, because we're also being asked to consider part funding this post rather than fully funding it. And funding it for a year really doesn't help next year's. There has to be a longer term strategy somewhere rather than an annual visit to here.
Jim, are you able to come in on that for the term funding, actually?
Thanks, Chair. My understanding is that the kind of annuality of the decision is directly related to the Scottish Government funding situation, where they review the operation of the Trust on an annual basis and grant funding on an annual basis, which provides continual uncertainty both to the Trust and the Council in terms of being in partnership with them. So the source of that kind of one-year approach is in fact the Scottish Government, who only allocate funding on an annual basis. My understanding is I think we've been funding the post for around 3 years now. But again, the 3 annual decisions are a reflection of that national position. And I won't try and answer how much money the Trust have got. Leave that to Mike.
Does that answer your question then, Jim?
It was actually a kind of rhetorical question anyway. I mean, how long is a bit of string? You know, are we really going to allow this to continue year after year after year after year? Or are we going to say if we happen to do anything, like the Robertson Trust, you didn't come back next year, because otherwise we'll find us in this position in perpetuity?
Well, that's certainly a consideration for members to make if they so require. Alistair?
Well, I made no comment, Chair, about year after year. I made, a comment, and I moved the motion and he seconded me in relation to this specific application. And as far as I'm concerned, and, I do take the point that Jim O'Neill has made in particular, that may be something that we've got to review, assuming in fact that we grant the application today. But for the meantime, and in this particular instance, I personally feel that it would not be unreasonable for us, as Strategic Housing Authority, to meet the full cost of this post for the ensuing year.
Okay, well, we have a motion on the table. Have we any amendments to that motion, or are members minded just to take it forward? No? Well, okay then. No. Okay, so Lucy, would you just recap on that motion so it's made clear to everybody, please?
So a motion has been put forward by Councillor Geddes and it's been seconded by Councillor Crothers. No alternative amendments have been put forward. And that is that the members have agreed to award full funding, subject to robust monitoring arrangements in place that the Council are getting full value for money.
For 1 year.
And for 1 year only.
Okay, thank you, members. I have no further business. I'd just like to say this obviously is the last committee of the Housing Sub before the council elections. It has been a pleasure working with you all. I really hope that this committee goes forward on a strong basis in the next administration, whoever that may be. But I think it is a very worthwhile strategic committee. It's been handled very well. It's non-political, and I think that's because we all have the welfare of our residents of Dumfries and Galloway at heart moving forward. And I'd like to see this committee go forward on that basis, but we'll determine that after the elections. Thank you.